The massive crystal spires of the Galactic Council stretched toward the twin suns of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 1,000 different worlds. Inside the great amphitheater, representatives from across the galaxy sat in carefully arranged tiers, each species maintaining the diplomatic protocols that had kept peace for over 3 millennia. Ambassador Sarah Chun walked through the corridors leading to the main chamber, her simple black suit a stark contrast to the elaborate robes, chitinous armor, and bioluminescent displays worn by the other delegates. Several alien diplomats turned to observe the human as she passed. The Kralix delegation, tall insectoid beings with compound eyes, clicked their mandibles in what might have been amusement. The gel-like Aquari rippled in their containment suits, their thoughts unreadable as always. The primitive species thinks it belongs here, whispered General Vorthak, the Zentaurian military commander, to his aide. His scaled hide glistened under the artificial lighting as his reptilian features twisted into what humans might recognize as a sneer. 300 years since first contact, and they still haven't learned their place. Sarah had heard variations of this sentiment countless times since humanity had been granted observer status in the Galactic Council. Earth was considered a backwater world, its people barely worthy of notice except as a curiosity. The human delegation was permitted to attend sessions, but they held no voting rights and were generally ignored when they attempted to speak. As Sarah entered the main chamber, the conversations gradually died down. Today's emergency session had been called by the hegemony of Vega, one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. Their territory spanned 12 star systems and included some of the most advanced civilizations known to exist. If they were calling for an emergency session, something significant had happened. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy. The air was carefully regulated to support the respiratory needs of dozens of different species. Translation devices hummed quietly, converting speech into the appropriate frequencies and chemical signals for each delegate. Gravity fields were adjusted for each section, allowing beings from high-gravity worlds to sit comfortably next to those who had evolved in near-zero gravity environments. Ambassador Chun took her place in the human section, a small alcove that had been added to the chamber almost as an afterthought when Earth was granted observer status. The section could accommodate perhaps 12 humans, though today she was alone. The other human diplomats were still traveling back from various assignments across the galaxy. Prime Chancellor Zephyros, the ancient ethereal who had led the Galactic Council for over 800 years, rose from the central dais. His form was barely corporeal, a shimmering outline of energy and consciousness that spoke directly to the minds of those present. Honored delegates, his mental voice resonated through the chamber. We have been summoned here by urgent news from the hegemony of Vega. Ambassador Kethvar will present their findings. The vegan ambassador stood slowly, his tall, graceful form moving with the fluid precision of his species. The vegans were among the oldest starfaring races, their technology so advanced that many younger civilizations worshipped them as gods. Their ships could cross the galaxy in mere days, their weapons could destroy entire star systems, and their knowledge of the universe was unmatched. Esteemed colleagues, Kethvar began, his voice carrying the melodic tones that made vegan speech sound like music. 3 cycles ago, our long-range sensors detected anomalous readings from the Outer Rim territories. Initially, we believed these to be natural phenomena, perhaps a new type of stellar formation or gravitational anomaly. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the translation devices seemed muted. However, upon closer investigation, we have discovered something far more disturbing. Our exploration fleets have encountered evidence of a massive military force operating beyond our known territories. Ships of unknown design, technology that operates on principles we do not understand, and, most concerning of all, clear signs of hostile intent. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The idea that there might be unknown civilizations with advanced technology was not entirely shocking. Many species had been discovered over the millennia. But the suggestion of hostility was different. The galaxy had been largely peaceful for thousands of years, with conflicts being resolved through diplomacy or, in extreme cases, limited police actions. Our scouts have observed fleets numbering in the millions of vessels, HFY continued. These ships appear to be designed purely for warfare, with no apparent civilian or exploratory functions. More disturbing still, we have detected the remains of several civilizations in the Outer Rim that have been completely destroyed. Not conquered, not subjugated, destroyed utterly. The murmur grew louder. Representatives began speaking urgently to their aides or activating communication devices to contact their home worlds. Based on trajectory analysis and the pattern of destruction, our xenoarchaeologists and military analysts have concluded that this unknown force is moving toward the core worlds. Their current vector suggests they will reach the outer territories of hegemony space within 2 standard cycles. General Vorthak slammed his clawed fist on his desk, causing several nearby delegates to jump. "Impossible," he roared. "The Zentorian Defense Fleet is the most powerful military force in the galaxy. No unknown species could pose a threat to established civilizations." Other military representatives voiced similar protests. The Kralix swarm commander chittered angrily about the impossibility of any force being able to threaten their billion-strong warrior castes. The crystalline shattered spoke in harmonic tones about their planet-sized defense platforms. The very idea that some unknown species could threaten the established order seemed absurd to them. But Ambassador Chun noticed something that the others had missed. She had spent her entire diplomatic career studying alien psychology and behavior, learning to read the subtle signs that indicated truth, deception, or fear. And right now, despite his confident words and musical voice, HFY was terrified. The vegan's bioluminescent patterns were cycling too quickly, a sign of stress that most species wouldn't recognize. His hands, normally held in perfect stillness, were trembling almost imperceptibly, and his eyes, those ancient, knowing eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, kept darting toward the exit as if he was calculating escape routes. "May I ask," Sarah said, rising from her seat, "what evidence you have of their technology and capabilities?" The chamber fell silent. It was considered highly irregular for an observer species to speak during an emergency session, and many of the delegates turned to stare at the human with expressions ranging from surprise to irritation. Prime Chancellor Zephyros's ethereal form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "The human observer wishes to speak. While irregular, I believe we should hear all perspectives." "Continue, Ambassador Chun." Sarah stepped forward slightly, noting how every eye in the chamber was now focused on her. "Ambassador HFY, you mentioned that these ships operate on unknown technological principles. Could you elaborate on what makes them so different from our own designs?" HFY hesitated for a moment, and Sarah caught another flash of that deep, primal fear in his expression. "Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They do not appear to use conventional fusion or antimatter propulsion, nor do they employ the dimensional folding techniques used by most advanced species. Most disturbing of all, our sensors cannot penetrate their hulls. It is as if they are constructed from materials that exist partially outside normal space-time. And their weapons?" Sarah pressed. "Unknown. Our scouts never got close enough to observe them in action. What we know comes from analysis of the destruction they left behind. Entire planets reduced to component atoms, stars destabilized, and collapsed. Space-time itself seems to have been torn and rewoven in some areas." The chamber erupted in panic conversations. This was far beyond anything the galaxy had ever faced. Even the most advanced civilizations had limits to their destructive capabilities, constraints imposed by physics and the practicalities of warfare. But What Kethvar was describing sounded like the work of beings who had transcended such limitations. Sarah raised her voice to be heard over the commotion. One more question, if I may. Have you attempted to make contact with this force? To determine their intentions or demands? We have sent envoys, Kethvar replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Long-range communication drones carrying messages of peace and offers of negotiation. None have returned, and our deep space monitoring stations have detected fragments of vegan technology scattered across several light years, suggesting that our messengers were destroyed long before reaching their intended targets. Now the real panic set in. If the hegemony of Vega, with their godlike technology and thousands of years of diplomatic experience, couldn't even establish communication with this unknown force, what hope did anyone else have? General Vorthak was on his feet again, his scaled hide flushed with the purple coloration that indicated extreme agitation in his species. We must prepare for war. Mobilize every fleet. Activate every defense platform. If these invaders want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. Similar cries rose from military representatives throughout the chamber. The Kraliks began emitting the pheromone signals that called their warrior castes to battle. The machine intelligences of the synthetic collective started broadcasting emergency protocols to their factory worlds. The bioshapers of the living fleet began the process of awakening their most powerful war forms. But Sarah noticed that the civilian leaders were not joining the war cries. Instead, they were looking increasingly desperate, turning to their military commanders with expressions that clearly asked, "Can we actually win this?" Prime Chancellor Zephyros raised his ethereal form higher, and gradually the chamber fell silent again. The situation is grave indeed. We must convene an emergency council of all faction leaders to coordinate our response. Ambassador Kethvar, we thank you for bringing this to our attention. All delegates will return to their home worlds to begin preparations. As the session began to wind down and delegates started filing out of the chamber, Sarah remained in her seat. She was thinking about something that had been bothering her throughout Kethvar's presentation, something that didn't quite add up. The vegan had described ships numbering in the millions, technology beyond galactic understanding, and destructive capabilities that defied physics. He had spoken of entire civilizations wiped from existence, and planets reduced to their component atoms. It was a description of an unstoppable force that should have terrified any rational being. But there was something else in his manner, something beyond fear. When he had spoken about the destroyed civilizations in the Outer Rim, there had been a flicker of something else in his expression. Relief? Satisfaction? It had been there for only a fraction of a second, but Sarah was certain she had seen it. As the chamber emptied, Sarah made her way to the communication center. If humanity was going to face this threat alongside the rest of the galaxy, she needed to send a message to Earth immediately. The human government needed to know what was coming, needed to begin whatever preparations were possible for a species with such limited military capabilities. But as she reached for the communication console, she found her path blocked by Kethvar himself. The tall vegan loomed over her, his usually melodic voice now carrying an edge of something dangerous. "Ambassador Chun," he said quietly, "I could not help but notice your questions during the session. Most perceptive. Tell me, what conclusions have you drawn for what you heard today?" Sarah looked up at him, noting the way his bioluminescent patterns had shifted to deep purples and reds configurations she had never seen in a vegan before. "I concluded that the galaxy faces a threat unlike anything in recorded history," she replied carefully. "Yes," Kethvar nodded slowly. "But did you perhaps conclude anything else? About the nature of this threat, or perhaps about the way I presented the information?" There was the test. Sarah realized that Kethvar knew she had noticed something, knew that her diplomatic training had allowed her to read between the lines of his presentation. The question now was whether she would voice her suspicions or maintain diplomatic silence. "I concluded," Sarah said slowly, "that you are more afraid of the questions that might be asked than you are of the answers you've already given." Kethvar's pattern shifted again, and for a moment Sarah thought she might have pushed too far. Then, unexpectedly, the vegan's expression became almost sad. "The humans are indeed as perceptive as the report suggested," he said quietly. "Ambassador Chun, I must ask you to refrain from sending any communications to your home world for the next few cycles. There are complications to this situation that have not yet been made public." "What kind of complications?" "The kind that could panic the entire galaxy if they were revealed prematurely." Kethvar glanced around the now-empty chamber, as if checking to make sure they were truly alone. "Tell me, Ambassador, in your studies of galactic history, have you ever wondered why certain sectors of space have remained unexplored for thousands of years? Why the Outer Rim territories are considered forbidden zones?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "I assumed they were considered too dangerous or too resource-poor to justify exploration. A reasonable assumption, and one that we have been content to let the galaxy believe." Kethvar moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The truth, Ambassador Chun, is that those sectors have not remained unexplored. They have remained quarantined." "Quarantined from what?" "From the galaxy itself. You see, the force that is now moving toward our space is not unknown to us. We have been watching them, containing them, for over 5,000 years. They are not invaders from beyond our borders, Ambassador. They are prisoners who have finally broken free." The full implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You mean the Galactic Council has been knowingly suppressing the existence of an advanced hostile civilization for millennia?" "Not suppressing, containing. There is a difference, though perhaps not one that will matter much in the coming days." Kethvar's patterns had shifted to deep blues and blacks now, colors Sarah associated with grief in vegan psychology. "What I told the Council today was true as far as it went. But it was not complete. These beings have indeed destroyed several civilizations in the Outer Rim, but those were not innocent exploratory species. They were guard stations, monitoring posts, containment facilities. And now they're free. Now they're free, and they're angry, and they remember exactly why they were imprisoned in the first place." Kethvar turned toward the chamber's massive view screen, which showed the peaceful vista of the twin suns setting over Centauri Prime. "Ambassador Chun, I need to know, can humanity be trusted with the complete truth of what we face?" Sarah thought about her species, about Earth's history of conflicts and cooperation, of betrayals and heroic sacrifices. "That depends on what the complete truth is and what you're asking us to do about it. The complete truth is that 5,000 years ago, the galaxy was at war. Not the small conflicts and police actions you see in modern times, but total war involving every major civilization. The enemy was a species that called themselves the Harbingers, beings who believed that all organic life was an abomination that needed to be cleansed from the universe." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. "How did the war end?" "It didn't end, Ambassador. We managed to trap them in a prison dimension, a pocket of space-time that existed parallel to our own reality, but couldn't interact with it. The prison was maintained by a network of stations positioned throughout the Outer Rim, constantly feeding energy into the dimensional barriers that kept the Harbingers contained. And something has gone wrong with the prison. Something has destroyed the prison. Every containment station has been obliterated, and our sensors show massive dimensional rifts opening throughout the quarantine zone. The Harbingers are not just free, they're returning with 5,000 years of accumulated hatred and advanced technology developed during their imprisonment." Sarah sank into one of the nearby chairs, her mind racing to process the implications. "How many of them are there?" "When we imprisoned them, their fleet numbered approximately 10 million vessels. Our models suggest that they have had sufficient resources in the prison dimension to expand that number significantly. We estimate current fleet strength at somewhere between 50 and 100 million ships. And what about their capabilities? You said they had technology beyond our understanding. That is perhaps the most terrifying part of all this, Kethvar replied. When we imprisoned them, they were roughly equivalent to the major galactic powers of that time. Powerful, but not overwhelmingly so. However, they have had 5 millennia to advance their technology in isolation, while we have grown complacent in peace. Our latest intelligence suggests they have developed weapons and defenses that make our current military forces look like primitive tribes with stone tools. Sarah stared at the view screen, watching the alien sunset and thinking about the peaceful world below them. In a few cycles, if Kethvar was right, none of this would exist anymore. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "Why risk revealing the truth to a representative of a species that has no military power and no influence in galactic politics?" Because Kethvar said, his patterns shifting to a configuration Sarah had never seen before. Humanity might be our only hope. That's impossible. We're barely even space-capable by galactic standards. Our most advanced warships would be helpless against even a single vegan cruiser, let alone these Harbinger vessels. True, but there's something about your species that the Council discovered during your first contact assessments, something that has never been made public. Kethvar paused, as if struggling with whether to continue. "Ambassador Chun, are you familiar with the concept of dimensional resonance?" "Only in the most basic sense. It's the theoretical ability of certain materials or life forms to interact with multiple layers of reality simultaneously." "Exactly. And it is something that was possessed by only one species in recorded galactic history until humanity was discovered." Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind, and the picture they formed was terrifying. The Harbingers. The Harbingers, Kethvar confirmed. They were able to manipulate dimensional space, to exist partially in multiple realities at once. It made them nearly impossible to kill and allowed them to develop technology that operated on principles the rest of us couldn't understand. It was only by trapping them in a prison dimension that we were able to defeat them. And you're saying humans have this same ability? Not all humans, but approximately 1 in every 10,000 of your species shows signs of dimensional resonance. Most never develop the ability consciously, but it's there dormant in your genetic structure. Sarah's mind was reeling. This was information that could change humanity's entire relationship with the galaxy, could transform them from insignificant observers to one of the most important species in known space. "But even if that's true," she said slowly, "it would take time to identify and train individuals with this ability. Time we apparently don't have. Which brings me to the real reason I'm telling you this." Kethvar moved to one of the chamber's control panels and activated a holographic display. The image showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with various colored zones indicating different political territories. The Harbingers are not approaching randomly. Their trajectory and the pattern of their attacks suggest they're moving systematically through areas of space that were involved in the original war. They're seeking revenge against the civilizations that imprisoned them. Exactly. But, according to our projections, they will not reach the core worlds for another 8 to 10 cycles. They are methodically destroying every military installation and civilian population in the outer territories first, which gives us time to prepare. Time to prepare, yes, but also time for something else. The holographic display zoomed in on a small section of space near the rim of explored territory. Your solar system, Ambassador Chun, lies directly in the path of their advance. Earth will be among the first targets they encounter. Sarah stared at the display, watching as a red line indicating the Harbinger's projected route passed directly through humanity's home system. How long do we have? 3 cycles, perhaps 4, if they encounter more resistance than expected in the intervening systems. And you want humanity to evacuate Earth? No, Ambassador. We want humanity to defend it. Sarah looked at the vegan in complete bewilderment. With what? Our entire space navy consists of maybe 3 dozen ships, none of which could survive a single shot from the weapons you've described. But that is exactly why your defense might succeed where ours would fail, Kethvar explained. The Harbingers have had 5,000 years to study our technology, our tactics, our way of thinking. They know exactly how we will respond to their attacks, because they were created to fight against civilizations like ours. But they've never fought humans. They've never fought humans. Your species thinks differently, fights differently, uses technology differently than any other race in the galaxy. More importantly, you have the potential to develop dimensional manipulation abilities. Even if only a small percentage of your population can access these powers, it might be enough to surprise them. Sarah stood up and walked to the view screen, looking out at the peaceful alien world below. You're asking us to sacrifice our world as an experiment, to serve as a testing ground to see if human dimensional abilities can be weaponized in time to make a difference. I'm asking you to save the galaxy, Kethvar replied quietly. Because if the Harbingers succeed in their campaign of extermination, every living being in known space will be dead within 50 cycles. And if we refuse, then Earth will be destroyed anyway, along with every other inhabited world. But if humanity agrees to make this stand, we will provide you with every resource at our disposal. Technology, weapons, defensive installations, military advisors. Everything we can spare. Sarah thought about her home world, about the billions of people who had no idea that their peaceful existence was about to be shattered. I'll need to consult with my government. Of course. But Ambassador, time is short. Every cycle we delay gives the Harbingers more opportunity to strengthen their forces and develop new weapons. A decision will need to be made soon. As Sarah prepared to leave the chamber, one more question occurred to her. Kethvar, why didn't you tell the council all of this? Why reveal the truth only to me? The vegan's patterns shifted to a deep golden color that Sarah associated with sadness and regret. Because if the galaxy learned that the council has been hiding the existence of the Harbingers for 5 millennia, there would be panic and revolution long before the enemy arrived. The very civilizations we're trying to protect would turn against us. So you're asking humanity to keep your secret as well as fight your war. I'm asking humanity to give the galaxy a chance to survive. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. As Sarah walked back through the corridors of the council building, her mind was spinning with the implications of what she had learned. In a few hours, she would need to compose a message to Earth that would likely change the course of human history forever. But first, she needed to think about the choice that lay before her species. They could reveal the truth about the Galactic Council's deception and potentially cause the collapse of galactic civilization in the face of the coming invasion. They could refuse to fight and accept the destruction of Earth along with the rest of the galaxy. Or they could accept Kethvar's bargain, stand and fight against impossible odds with the hope that human uniqueness might make the difference. As she reached her quarters, Sarah realized that the choice wasn't really hers to make. It belonged to humanity as a whole, to the billions of people who would have to live and die with the consequences. But as she began composing her message to Earth, one thought kept running through her mind. For the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, someone was asking them not just to observe or to follow, but to lead. The question was whether they were ready for that responsibility. The emergency session of the United Earth Government convened in Geneva exactly 18 hours after Ambassador Chen's encrypted transmission reached Sol System. The communication had bypassed normal diplomatic channels, carrying security codes that indicated a threat to species survival. Within minutes of its arrival, every major leader on Earth had been awakened and transported to the secure meeting facility beneath the Alps. President Elena Vasquez sat at the head of the oval table, her weathered face showing the strain of a career spent managing humanity's first tentative steps into galactic politics. Around her sat the representatives of every major nation, military leaders, scientists, and the small group of individuals who had been secretly identified as possessing dimensional resonance abilities. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's leading expert on theoretical physics, finished reading Chen's report aloud. The silence that followed was deafening. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said General Harrison, the gruff leader of Earth's combined military forces. The galaxy has been lying to us about an imprisoned enemy species for 3 centuries. This enemy is now free, more powerful than anything we can imagine, and heading directly for Earth. And the same people who lied to us are now asking us to sacrifice our world to test whether humans might have some magical ability to fight beings that defeated the combined might of the galaxy 5,000 years ago. That's a rather blunt summary, but essentially accurate, President Vasquez replied. The question now is what we do about it. Admiral Sarah Okafor, head of the Earth Defense Navy, pulled up holographic displays showing humanity's current military capabilities. Our entire space fleet consists of 37 vessels, the largest of which carries maybe 200 personnel. According to Chen's report, the Harbingers have millions of ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything we've ever built. Numbers aren't everything, interrupted Dr. James Crawford, the soft-spoken director of Earth's Department of Paranormal Research. If dimensional resonance is real, if even a small percentage of our population can develop these abilities, then we might have advantages that can't be measured in terms of conventional firepower. Dr. Chun Wei, no relation to the ambassador, was Earth's leading expert on the few humans who had demonstrated unusual abilities. We've identified approximately 700 individuals worldwide who show signs of dimensional resonance. Most can only perform minor manipulations, moving small objects short distances, sensing things that shouldn't be detectable by normal means. 700 people against millions of ships, General Harrison said grimly. Those aren't odds I'd bet the survival of the species on. Unless they're the right 700 people, said a quiet voice from the corner of the room. Everyone turned to look at Captain Lisa Park, a young officer who had been included in the meeting for reasons that were still classified above most of the attendee security levels. She was one of the 700, and, unlike the others, her abilities had manifested in ways that had attracted the attention of military researchers. Captain Park, President Vasquez said carefully, "Would you care to elaborate on that comment?" Lisa stood up slowly, and as she did, several people in the room gasped. She was glowing with a faint, shifting light that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. When she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her, as if she was occupying multiple positions simultaneously. "I've been working with Dr. Crawford's team for the past 2 years," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality that made it seem to come from multiple directions at once. "We've discovered that dimensional resonance isn't just about moving objects or sensing things. It's about existing in multiple layers of reality at the same time." She gestured, and the air in front of her shimmered. Suddenly, everyone in the room could see the meeting table from above, below, and from several impossible angles simultaneously. Then, the vision faded, and Lisa returned to her normal appearance. "When I'm fully accessing my abilities," she continued, "I can see and interact with dimensional space. I can move through barriers that exist in normal reality, but not in other dimensions. I can attack targets that are physically present, but dimensionally shifted. And I can defend against weapons that operate on dimensional principles." Dr. Crawford activated a holographic projector, showing footage of Lisa's training sessions. The images showed her moving through solid walls, deflecting energy beams that should have been impossible to block, and manipulating objects that were clearly existing in multiple realities at once. "The implications are staggering," he explained. "If we can train even a few hundred humans to access these abilities at Captain Park's level, we could have a military force that operates on principles the Harbingers might not expect." "Might not expect," Admiral Okafor emphasized. "But Chen's report says the Harbingers also have dimensional abilities. What makes us think we can match beings who have had 5,000 years to perfect these powers?" "Because we're human," Captain Park replied simply. Dr. Crawford's research suggests that human dimensional resonance works differently than what the galactic records describe for the Harbingers. They seem to have developed their abilities as a species-wide phenomenon, with consistent patterns and limitations. Human abilities are individual, chaotic, unpredictable. Unpredictable how? President Vasquez asked. Lisa looked around the room, then made another gesture. Suddenly, every person present found themselves seeing the meeting from Lisa's perspective, experiencing her thoughts and sensations directly for a brief moment. The effect was disorienting and profound, giving everyone a glimpse of what it was like to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Every human with these abilities manifests them differently, she explained as the effect faded. Some can phase through matter, others can manipulate time dilation. Still others can create pocket dimensions or fold space. The Harbingers developed standardized powers based on their biology and society. Humans are developing wild variations based on individual psychology and experience. Dr. Crawford pulled up more data. We've documented over 40 different types of dimensional manipulation among our identified subjects. Most are still very weak, but the potential for development is enormous. General Harrison was studying the tactical displays with growing interest. So what you're saying is that if we can train these individuals, we could have a force that fights using abilities the Harbingers have never encountered before. Exactly. But there's more. Dr. Crawford activated another set of displays. Our research suggests that dimensional abilities can be enhanced through technology. If the Galactic Council provides us with advanced equipment, we might be able to amplify human powers far beyond their natural levels. How long would training take? Admiral Okafor asked. That's where we have a problem, Lisa admitted. Learning to consciously control dimensional abilities is incredibly difficult. Most of our subjects took months or years to develop even basic control. We have maybe 4 cycles, that's about 15 months in Earth time, to train an entire army. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the impossibility of the timeline. What if we don't train an army? Suggested Dr. Webb. What if we train specialists? Explain, President Vasquez said. Traditional military thinking focuses on large numbers of standardized units. But if human dimensional abilities are naturally chaotic and individual, maybe we should work with that instead of against it. Instead of trying to create hundreds of soldiers with the same powers, we develop a small number of individuals with vastly different specialized abilities. Captain Park nodded enthusiastically. Like a team where each member has completely different dimensional capabilities. One person who can phase ships through solid matter. Another who can manipulate time around specific targets. Someone else who can create dimensional rifts that redirect enemy fire. A strike force designed not to match the Harbinger's power directly, but to confuse and disrupt their operations using abilities they can't predict or counter, General Harrison mused. It's unconventional, but it might work. It's also incredibly risky, Admiral Okafor pointed out. We'd be betting the survival of Earth on maybe a dozen people with barely tested abilities, as opposed to betting it on a conventional military force that would be obliterated in seconds, President Vasquez replied dryly. At this point, unconventional might be our only option. Dr. Chun Wei cleared his throat. There's something else we need to consider. Ambassador Chen's report mentions that the Galactic Council is willing to provide us with advanced technology and military support. But they're also asking us to keep their secret about the Harbinger's imprisonment. Political implications, General Harrison said grimly. If we reveal that the Council has been lying to the galaxy for millennia, it could cause the collapse of galactic civilization just when we need unity the most. On the other hand, President Vasquez said keeping that secret makes us complicit in the deception. And if other species discover the truth later, humanity could be blamed for the cover-up. The debate continued for hours, touching on military strategy, ethics, technology, and the fundamental question of whether humanity was ready to take on a leadership role in galactic affairs. Finally, President Vasquez called for a break and asked the key military and scientific leaders to remain behind for a classified discussion. I want honest assessments, she said once the room had cleared. General Harrison, if we commit to this plan, what are our actual chances of success? The general was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, in any conventional military scenario, I'd say 0. But this isn't conventional. If the dimensional abilities are real, if we can develop them quickly enough, and if the Galactic Council provides the support they promised, I'd say maybe 5%. Admiral, I agree with General Harrison's assessment. But I'd add that even if we fail to stop the Harbingers, we might gather intelligence that could help other species develop countermeasures. Dr. Crawford, from a scientific perspective, this represents the greatest opportunity for advancement in human history. Even if we lose the battle, what we learn about dimensional manipulation could transform our understanding of reality itself. President Vasquez looked around the table at the faces of the people who would have to make this impossible plan work. Captain Park, you'd be risking your life and the lives of everyone else with these abilities. Are you willing to do that? Lisa's expression was serious, but determined. Ma'am, with respect, we're all going to die if the Harbingers reach Earth anyway. At least this way, we die fighting and maybe give the galaxy a chance. The president nodded slowly. Then, I think we have our answer. The full session reconvened 6 hours later, and President Vasquez addressed the assembled leaders with a decision that would reshape humanity's role in the galaxy. After extensive deliberation, the United Earth government has decided to accept the Galactic Council's proposal. We will stand and fight against the Harbinger invasion, using our dimensional capabilities and whatever support the Council can provide. The announcement was met with a mixture of approval and deep concern from the assembled leaders. However, the president continued, we are not going into this blindly. Our conditions are as follows. First, the Galactic Council must provide full technical specifications for their most advanced weapons and defense systems. Second, they must assign military advisors and support personnel to assist with Earth's defense. Third, they must establish refugee facilities for Earth's population in case our defense fails. And the secret about the Harbinger's imprisonment, asked the Secretary of State. We will maintain the Council's secret for now, but only as long as it serves the greater good. If we determine that revealing the truth would help other species prepare for the invasion, we reserve the right to make that information public. General Harrison leaned forward. Ma'am, what about the timeline? We have 15 months to prepare for an enemy that defeated the entire galaxy 5,000 years ago. Which brings me to our final condition, President Vasquez replied. We're not just going to prepare, we're going to recruit. The room erupted in confused voices, and the president raised her hand for silence. Ambassador Chin's report makes it clear that the Harbingers are moving systematically through space, destroying everything in their path. That means there are going to be survivors, refugees from destroyed worlds who have nowhere else to go. Dr. Webb caught on first. You want to offer them sanctuary on Earth in exchange for their knowledge and assistance. Exactly. We'll turn Earth into a gathering point for everyone who wants to fight back against the Harbingers. Scientists who understand their technology, soldiers who have faced them in battle, leaders who know their tactics. We'll make Earth not just humanity's last stand, but the galaxy's rallying point. Admiral Okafor was nodding approvingly. It's brilliant. Instead of facing the Harbingers with just human forces, we'd have a combined army of every species and civilization that wants to survive. It's also incredibly dangerous, General Harrison pointed out. We'd be inviting potentially millions of refugees to our world, along with all the chaos and conflict that would entail. The alternative is facing the Harbingers alone, President Vasquez replied. I'd rather take my chances with chaos than with certain destruction. Captain Park raised her hand. Ma'am, there's something else we should consider. If we're going to be training humans with dimensional abilities, having access to refugees from other species might help us understand how these powers work on a broader level. Dr. Crawford nodded enthusiastically. She's right. The galactic records mention that some other species have individuals with minor dimensional sensitivity. If we could study them alongside our own people, we might be able to develop new techniques and applications. Plus, added Dr. Chinwei, refugees from the outer territories would have direct experience with Harbinger attacks. They'd know firsthand what we're facing. President Vasquez looked around the room one more time. Then it settled. General Harrison, I want you to work with Admiral Okafor to begin immediate expansion of Earth's military production capabilities. Dr. Crawford, start identifying and recruiting every human with dimensional abilities you can find. Dr. Webb, I want you to liaise with the Galactic Council about technology transfer. She stood up, and everyone else followed suit. Ladies and gentlemen, 15 months from now, Earth is either going to be a smoking ruin or the place where the galaxy made its stand against extinction. Let's make sure it's the latter. As the meeting dispersed, Captain Park approached President Vasquez privately. Ma'am, there's something else you should know about dimensional abilities. Something we haven't told the others yet. The president gestured for her to continue. The training isn't just difficult because the abilities are hard to control. It's difficult because using them changes you. Every time I access my powers, I can feel myself becoming different, more connected to other realities, less connected to normal space-time. Are you saying these abilities are dangerous to the people who use them? I'm saying they're transformative. The humans who develop strong dimensional capabilities won't be entirely human anymore. We'll be something new, something that exists between realities. President Vasquez considered this for a long moment. And you're still willing to undergo this transformation? Lisa nodded firmly. To save Earth, to save the galaxy, yes. But I thought you should know the real cost we're asking people to pay. As the president walked back to her office, she reflected on the conversation. In 15 months, humanity would face an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. They would do so with barely tested abilities, experimental technology, and allies they hadn't even met yet. But for the first time since receiving Ambassador Chin's message, President Vasquez felt something approaching hope. Because if there was one thing humanity had always excelled at, it was adapting to impossible situations and finding ways to turn disadvantages into strengths. The Harbingers might have had 5,000 years to prepare for this war, but they had never faced anything like humanity before. Meanwhile, in the deep space between star systems, the first Harbinger scout ships were already probing the defenses of the Outer Rim territories. Their sensors detected the energy signatures of the approaching refugee fleets and the scattered communications of the galactic civilizations trying to coordinate their defenses. To the Harbinger commanders, this looked exactly like what they had expected: panic, chaos, and the same predictable responses their enemy had always shown. They began adjusting their attack patterns to account for the familiar tactics and technologies they had studied during their imprisonment. None of them noticed the small, strange energy signatures coming from a little blue world on the edge of explored space. Signatures that matched no known technology and operated on principles that weren't in any of their databases. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in 5,000 years, the Harbingers were going to encounter something they hadn't planned for. The massive Galactic Council transport ships began arriving at Earth 3 weeks after President Vasquez's decision. The first vessels carried vegan technology specialists and military advisors, their elegant ships dwarfing even Earth's largest orbital stations. Behind them came refugee fleets from a dozen different species, carrying the survivors of the Harbinger's advance. Captain Lisa Park stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Luna defense platform, watching as another refugee convoy emerged from dimensional space. The ships were clearly damaged, their hull plates scarred by weapons that left reality-distorting marks. Some vessels were missing entire sections, held together by emergency force fields and the desperate engineering of species fighting for survival. The carry convoy from the Epsilon sector, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, reading from her tactical display. Approximately 50,000 refugees, mostly civilians. They're requesting immediate medical assistance. Lisa nodded, opening her communication channel. The carry convoy, this is Luna Defense Control. You are cleared for approach to Medical Station 7. Escort fighters are being deployed to assist with emergency landings. As the damaged ships began their descent toward the medical facilities, Lisa reflected on how dramatically Earth had changed in just 6 months. The quiet blue world that had once hosted only 8 billion humans now sheltered over 200 million refugees from across the galaxy. Every nation had opened its borders. Every city had expanded to accommodate the influx of species fleeing the Harbinger advance. The technological transformation had been even more dramatic. With Galactic Council assistance, Earth's industries were now producing weapons and defensive systems that operated on principles humanity had never imagined. Dimensional phase generators created shields that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Quantum cascade weapons could strike targets through folded spacetime. Bioneural computers interfaced directly with users' consciousness to coordinate attacks across multiple dimensions. But the most significant changes had occurred in the humans themselves. Lisa felt the familiar tingling sensation as her dimensional abilities activated automatically in response to her emotional state. Around her, the air shimmered as multiple layers of reality became visible. She could see the refugee ships, not just as they appeared in normal space, but as they existed across the dimensional spectrum, colored threads of possibility, probability, and alternate outcomes. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Kim said carefully, "you're glowing again." Lisa looked down at her hands, noting the faint luminescence that surrounded her whenever she accessed her powers unconsciously. I'm still learning to control the passive manifestations. This was the price of humanity's crash course in dimensional manipulation. Of the 700 individuals initially identified as having resonance abilities, nearly 300 had developed powers far beyond anything previously documented. But the rapid advancement came with costs that were only beginning to be understood. Dr. Crawford approached from across the observation deck, his expression troubled. As the lead researcher on human dimensional abilities, he had been documenting the changes that occurred in enhanced individuals. "Lisa, we need to discuss the latest test results," he said quietly. She knew from his tone that the news wasn't good. "How bad?" "Your dimensional coherence is down another 5% this month. That brings your connection to baseline reality to just 62%. Lisa absorbed this information without visible reaction, though Kim looked concerned. The dimensional coherence measurements tracked how anchored enhanced humans remained to normal spacetime. As their abilities grew stronger, they became increasingly disconnected from baseline reality. "What does that mean practically?" Kim asked. "It means that Lisa is gradually becoming a multidimensional being," Dr. Crawford explained. "She exists more in alternate realities and less in our own. Eventually, if the trend continues, she might lose the ability to interact with normal spacetime entirely. But my combat effectiveness is still increasing," Lisa pointed out. "Yesterday's training simulation showed I can now phase an entire ship through solid matter while simultaneously attacking targets in 6 different dimensional layers." "Yes, but at what cost?" "The psychological evaluations show that you're losing emotional connections to baseline humans. Your thought patterns are becoming increasingly alien." Lisa considered this, watching the refugee ships with perceptions that operated across multiple realities. She could see not just what was happening, but what might happen, what had happened in alternate timelines, what was happening in parallel dimensions. To her enhanced senses, the idea that someone could experience reality through only a single-dimensional layer seemed impossibly limiting. "Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing," she said finally. "If we're going to fight beings who exist across multiple realities, perhaps we need to become multidimensional ourselves." Before Dr. Crawford could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights activated, and tactical displays throughout the observation deck showed incoming priority communications. "This is Admiral Okafor," the voice announced over the station's communication system. "All enhanced personnel report to combat operations immediately. We're receiving distress signals from the Kepler system." Lisa activated her dimensional abilities and phased through the station's bulkheads, moving directly to combat operations in seconds rather than the minutes it would have taken to walk there normally. The ability to ignore physical barriers was one of the first powers enhanced humans had developed, and it remained one of the most useful. The Combat Operations Center was a chaos of activity. Holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy, tracking the Harbinger's advance and coordinating refugee evacuation efforts. At the center of it all, Admiral Okafor stood before a massive tactical display that showed the current crisis. The situation is this. The Admiral began as the enhanced humans assembled around her. 6 hours ago, a Harbinger scout force engaged the Kepler System defense fleet. The system has a population of 12 billion across 4 planets, plus significant military installations. The display zoomed in on the Kepler system, showing the positions of defending ships and orbital platforms. As they watched, red markers appeared indicating Harbinger vessels. The Defender fleet consisted of 200 ships from 5 different species, supported by planetary defense platforms and asteroid fortresses. They should have been more than capable of dealing with a scout force. Should have been, asked Captain Martinez, another enhanced human whose abilities focused on temporal manipulation. The entire defense fleet was destroyed in 47 minutes. Admiral Okafor replied grimly. The Harbinger scout force consisted of only 12 ships. The silence in the room was profound. Everyone present understood the implications. If 12 Harbinger ships could destroy a fleet of 200 in under an hour, what chance did anyone have against their main force? However, the Admiral continued, we've received dimensional scan data from the battle that reveals something interesting. The Harbinger vessels appear to phase in and out of normal space-time during combat, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. Lisa stepped forward, studying the tactical data, but dimensional phasing works both ways. If they're shifting between realities during combat, they're vulnerable to attacks that can follow them across dimensional boundaries. Exactly, which is why we're sending you. The display changed to show a new tactical scenario. A single Earth ship, barely larger than a frigate, was positioned near the edge of the Kepler system. The UES Quantum Dawn is our first fully dimensional capable vessel. Her hull exists partially in normal space and partially in dimensional flux, making her effectively invisible to conventional sensors. Her weapons can strike targets across multiple reality layers simultaneously. Captain Park studied the ship's specifications with growing excitement. And her crew, 7 enhanced humans, each with specialized dimensional abilities. You'll be commanding the mission, Lisa. Dr. Crawford stepped forward, his expression alarmed. Admiral, with respect, sending 7 of our most enhanced individuals into combat against the Harbingers is incredibly risky. We don't know how their abilities will interact with Harbinger technology, which is exactly why we need to find out, Admiral Okafor replied. The Harbingers are moving systematically through the galaxy, destroying everything in their path. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 cycles. This may be our only chance to gather intelligence on their capabilities while testing our own. What about the civilians in the Kepler system? Asked Lieutenant Torres, whose dimensional abilities allowed her to manipulate gravity across multiple reality layers. Evacuation is already underway. 3/4 of the population has been relocated to refugee facilities on Earth and other core worlds. The remainder are in hardened shelters on the outer planets. Lisa looked around at her teammates, seeing them not just as they appeared in normal space, but as the complex multidimensional beings they had become. Martinez existed as a shifting pattern of temporal possibility. His consciousness spread across multiple moments simultaneously. Torres appeared as a gravitational distortion that extended through several reality layers. Each of them had been transformed by their abilities, made into something that was no longer entirely human. When do we depart? She asked. Immediately. The Harbingers finished with the defense fleet 6 hours ago, but they're still in the system. Our long-range sensors suggest they're conducting some kind of detailed scan of the planets and orbital facilities. Any theories about what they're looking for? Admiral Okafor's expression grew even more grim. Ambassador Chin's latest intelligence from the Galactic Council suggests the Harbingers aren't just destroying civilizations randomly. They're looking for something specific, some kind of technology or information that was developed during the original war. What kind of technology? The kind that could threaten beings who exist across multiple realities. An hour later, Lisa stood on the bridge of the UES Quantum Dawn as it prepared for departure. The ship itself was a marvel of human galactic hybrid technology, its hull constructed from materials that existed in a state of dimensional flux. When she looked at the walls with her enhanced senses, she could see them phasing in and out of reality at the quantum level. All stations report ready, announced Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the ship's navigation specialist whose abilities allowed him to perceive and manipulate the dimensional currents that connected different regions of space. Engage dimensional drive, Lisa ordered. The universe folded around them as the quantum dawn shifted into dimensional space. Unlike the familiar hyperspace travel used by most galactic species, dimensional transit allowed the ship to move through multiple layers of reality simultaneously. To Lisa's enhanced perceptions, she could see their destination not as a distant point in space, but as a convergent probability across multiple dimensional layers. Transition complete, Rodriguez reported. We're now traveling through dimensional space at approximately 50 times light speed. Estimated arrival at Kepler's system in 4 hours. Any sign we were detected during departure? Negative. Dimensional signatures indicate we're effectively invisible to conventional sensors while in this state. Lisa settled into the command chair, feeling the ship's systems interfacing directly with her consciousness through bioneural links. The Quantum Dawn wasn't just a vessel she was commanding. It was an extension of her own dimensional abilities, responding to her thoughts and intentions as much as to explicit orders. As they traveled through dimensional space, Lisa found herself thinking about Dr. Crawford's warnings about the psychological costs of enhancement. She was aware that her thought patterns had changed, that she was losing emotional connections to baseline humanity. But she was also aware that this transformation might be necessary. The humans she had once been could never have understood the nature of the threat the galaxy faced. Baseline humans thought in terms of single realities, linear time, and fixed physical laws. The Harbingers operated beyond such limitations, and defeating them would require minds that could function on their level. "Captain," called out Sergeant Kim from the tactical station, "I'm picking up something odd on the dimensional sensors." Lisa's attention focused on the readings, her enhanced perceptions analyzing data streams that would have been incomprehensible to unmodified humans. What am I looking at? Dimensional echoes from the Kepler system. Whatever the Harbingers did there, it left ripples across multiple reality layers. Lisa studied the patterns, seeing not just the immediate data, but the implications spreading across probability space. It's not just destruction, she realized. They're rewriting local space-time, changing the fundamental structure of reality in the areas they've attacked. Rewriting it how? I'm not sure, but the dimensional signature suggests they're making the attacked areas more compatible with their own nature, more suitable for beings who exist across multiple realities. The implications were terrifying. If the Harbingers could alter reality itself to suit their needs, then they weren't just conquering the galaxy, they were transforming it into something that could only support their kind of life. ETA to Kepler system? Lisa asked. 2 hours, 17 minutes. Lisa activated the ship's communication system, opening channels to all crew members. This is the captain. Based on sensor readings from our destination, we're not just facing an enemy with advanced technology. We're facing beings who can rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. Everyone needs to be prepared for combat conditions unlike anything we've trained for. She paused, looking around at the crew members who had volunteered for this impossible mission. I won't lie to you. Our chances of survival are minimal, And even if we succeed in gathering intelligence, we may not be able to return with it. But what we learn here could determine whether the galaxy survives or is transformed into something unrecognizable. "We understand, Captain," replied Lieutenant Torres. "We accepted these transformations to fight this enemy. Whatever they've done to themselves to gain their powers, we've done to ourselves as well. Maybe it's time to see whose version of evolution is stronger." As the quantum dawn continued its journey through dimensional space, Lisa felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. Her connection to baseline humanity might be fading, but her connection to something larger was growing. She existed now as part of the quantum foam that underlay reality, aware of the infinite possibilities that branched out from every moment. In 2 hours, she would face an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for 5 millennia. An enemy that existed across multiple realities and could rewrite the laws of physics at will. But for the first time since learning about the Harbinger threat, Lisa felt truly confident. Because humanity's response to the crisis hadn't been to build bigger weapons or stronger shields. It had been to evolve beyond the limitations that made them vulnerable in the first place. The Harbingers were about to discover that they were no longer the only multidimensional species in the galaxy. As if responding to her thoughts, the dimensional sensors detected something new. Deep in the quantum foam that surrounded the ship, something vast was stirring. Not the Harbingers they were traveling to face, but something else entirely. Something that had been sleeping in the spaces between realities until the dimensional disturbances of the current conflict had awakened it. Lisa studied the sensor readings with growing amazement and terror. Whatever was moving in the deep dimensions dwarfed even the Harbingers in scope and power, and it was heading toward the galaxy from directions that didn't exist in normal space-time. The war that was about to begin would be more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. But it would also offer opportunities for transformation and evolution that could reshape the nature of life itself. Lisa smiled, her consciousness expanding across multiple reality layers. As she prepared for the greatest challenge in galactic history, the quantum dawn emerged from dimensional space at the edge of the Kepler system to find a battlefield unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Where once there had been 4 thriving planets orbiting a stable star, now there were structures that seemed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously, their geometry shifting and flowing in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Captain Lisa Park stood on the bridge, her enhanced senses processing information that would have driven baseline humans insane. Through the ship's dimensional sensors, she could perceive the Harbinger vessels as they truly were. Massive constructs that existed across dozens of reality layers, their true size and complexity impossible to measure in normal space-time. "Tactical analysis," she ordered, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that resonated across dimensional boundaries. Lieutenant Torres, her consciousness now spread across multiple gravitational fields, responded with data that flowed directly into Lisa's mind through their shared dimensional interface. 12 Harbinger vessels, each approximately 3 kilometers long in baseline reality, but extending through at least 47 dimensional layers. "They're not just ships, Captain. They're mobile reality generators." "What do you mean?" Sergeant Kim, whose specialized abilities allowed him to perceive temporal structures, added his analysis. "The Harbingers aren't operating within the existing laws of physics. They're creating localized regions where different physical laws apply. In the space around their vessels, time flows in loops, gravity operates in 11 dimensions, and matter exists in quantum superposition states." Lisa studied the readings, her transformed mind beginning to understand the true scope of what they faced. They're not just using advanced technology. They've fundamentally altered their relationship with reality itself. And they're doing the same thing to everything they encounter, added Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. "Look at the planetary structures." The display shifted to show what had once been Kepler Prime, the system's main inhabited world. The planet still existed, but It had been transformed into something that defied description. Its surface rippled between different states of matter. Its gravity wells extended through multiple dimensions, and structures that might have been cities existed as probability clouds rather than solid matter. "Are there any survivors?" Lisa asked. "Unknown. Our sensors can't penetrate the dimensional distortions around the planet. But there's still energy signatures that might indicate life, just not life as we normally understand it." Lisa made her decision. "We're going in. Navigation. Plot a course that keeps us at the edge of their reality distortion fields. Tactical. Prepare all dimensional weapons for combat." Captain Dr. Crawford's voice came over the communication system from Earth, where he was monitoring the mission. "Be extremely careful. The readings we're getting suggest that prolonged exposure to Harbinger reality fields could fundamentally alter your crew's dimensional coherence." "Understood, Doctor. But we need intelligence on their capabilities, and this may be our only chance to observe them in action." As the quantum dawn moved deeper into the system, the crew began to experience the effects of the altered reality zones. The ship itself, designed to exist partially in dimensional space, began resonating with the Harbinger fields in unexpected ways. "Captain," Torres reported, her voice now carrying overtones that suggested she was speaking from multiple temporal positions simultaneously, "the ship's dimensional matrix is synchronizing with the Harbinger reality fields. We're becoming more compatible with their version of space-time." Lisa felt the change herself. Her consciousness, already spread across multiple dimensional layers, began expanding further. She could perceive not just the present moment, but probability streams extending into the future and memory echoes from the past. More disturbing, she could sense the thoughts and intentions of the Harbinger crews. "They know we're here," she announced. "But they're not treating us as a threat. We register to them as curious. They've never encountered beings with our type of dimensional abilities." "Are they trying to communicate?" Rodriguez asked. "No, they're studying us. To them, we're an interesting anomaly that they want to understand before they destroy us." The largest Harbinger vessel began moving toward them, its form shifting through reality layers as it approached. As it drew closer, the crew of the Quantum Dawn found themselves seeing the universe from entirely new perspectives. "Captain," Kim said, his voice now echoing with temporal harmonics, "I'm receiving information directly from the Harbinger ship. Not communication exactly, but data transfer through dimensional resonance." "What kind of data?" "Historical records. They're showing me why they were imprisoned, what the original war was about." Through Kim's enhanced temporal senses, the crew began experiencing flashes of memory from 5,000 years ago. They saw the galaxy as it had been then, younger, more chaotic, with hundreds of species competing for resources and territory. And they saw the Harbingers as they had been, a single species that had discovered how to transcend the limitations of single reality existence. "They weren't evil," Kim reported, his consciousness now partially synchronized with the alien vessel. "They were trying to evolve the entire galaxy, to lift all species beyond the constraints of baseline reality. And the other species saw this as an attack on their nature," Lisa realized, understanding flooding through her enhanced mind. The war wasn't about conquest. It was about forced evolution. More memories flowed through their dimensional link. The Harbingers had offered their transformation to other species, trying to help them ascend to multidimensional existence. But most races had rejected the offer, seeing it as an attempt to destroy their essential nature. The conflict had escalated when the Harbingers began forcing the transformation on unwilling populations. They were trying to save everyone from the limitations of single reality existence, Torres said, her perception now spanning multiple gravitational dimensions. But their methods involved rewriting entire civilizations without consent, Lisa finished. No wonder the galaxy united against them. The Harbinger vessel was now close enough for direct dimensional contact. Through her enhanced senses, Lisa could perceive the beings aboard the alien ship. They were no longer recognizable as any specific species, having been transformed by millennia of dimensional manipulation into entities that existed as pure consciousness spread across multiple reality layers. One of the Harbinger minds reached out to hers, and suddenly, Lisa was experiencing direct mental contact with a being whose thoughts operated on principles beyond normal comprehension. Fascinating asterisk, the alien mind communicated through dimensional resonance. Asterisk, you have achieved transformation through different pathways than we expected. Your evolution is chaotic, unpredictable, but remarkably effective. Asterisk, why are you attacking the galaxy? Lisa projected back. We are not attacking. We are completing the transformation that was interrupted 5 millennia ago. The prison dimension showed us new possibilities, new ways to exist beyond the constraints of single reality consciousness. We return to share these gifts with all life. Asterisk, and if species refuse your gifts, then they remain trapped in the limitations of baseline existence, unable to perceive the greater realities that surround them. Such existence is a form of death. We cannot permit consciousness to remain so constrained. Asterisk, through the mental link, Lisa saw the Harbinger's perspective on reality. To them, beings who existed in only a single-dimensional layer were like two-dimensional drawings try to understand a three-dimensional world. The Harbingers saw their transformations not as destruction, but as liberation from the prison of limited existence. But she also saw something else in their minds, fear. The Harbingers were afraid of something that existed in the deep dimensions beyond even their reach. What are you afraid of? She asked. The Harbinger mind recoiled slightly, and for a moment the mental link wavered. Asterisk, you should not be able to perceive that. Your transformation is more complete than we realized. Asterisk, answer the question. There are entities in the deepest layers of reality that make even our transformed existence seem primitive. The prison dimension brought us into contact with their realm. They are displeased with the level of consciousness that has emerged in this galaxy. If we cannot elevate all species to multidimensional existence quickly enough, they will intervene directly. Asterisk, the implications hit Lisa like a physical blow. The Harbingers weren't just trying to transform the galaxy for ideological reasons. They were racing against time to prevent something far worse from happening. What would direct intervention mean? Complete dissolution of this dimensional region. All matter, all energy, all consciousness reduced to component quantum foam and rebuilt according to their design principles. Asterisk, through the link, Lisa saw images of what the deep entities were capable of. Entire galactic clusters simply ceasing to exist, reality itself being unraveled and rewoven in patterns that could only support the most advanced forms of multidimensional consciousness. Then, why fight the species of this galaxy? Lisa demanded. Why not work together to achieve the transformation? Because most species are incapable of voluntary evolution. They cling to their limitations, refuse to abandon the comfort of single reality existence. Force becomes necessary to save them from eventual dissolution. Asterisk, Lisa felt her crew's consciousness interfacing with hers through their shared dimensional links, all of them processing this revelation simultaneously. They were caught between two impossible choices. Allow the Harbingers to forcibly transform the galaxy's populations, or face annihilation by entities so advanced that they made the Harbingers seem primitive by comparison. There might be a third option, Lisa said finally. The Harbinger mind focused intently on her thoughts. Explain. Humanity has achieved multidimensional transformation through voluntary evolution. We've done it in months rather than millennia, and we've done it without losing our essential nature. What if we could find a way to help other species achieve the same transformation willingly? Impossible. We spent millions of years trying to develop such methods. The psychological barriers are too strong. Asterisk, but you never had humans to work with before. Our transformation is different from yours. Maybe different enough to find new solutions. For a long moment, the Harbinger mind was silent, processing this possibility across multiple dimensional layers. Around them, The reality distortions of the alien fleet continued to warp space-time in patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Your proposal has merit asterisk. The Harbinger finally communicated. Asterisk, but time is limited. The deep entities grow impatient with the slow pace of evolution in this galaxy. We have perhaps 5 cycles before they intervene directly. Asterisk, then we work together. Humans and Harbingers combining our different approaches to multidimensional existence. Find a way to offer transformation that species can accept voluntarily. And if we fail, Asterisk Lisa's consciousness expanded further, touching the edges of the deep dimensional layers where the truly ancient entities dwelled. She could sense them there, vast intellects that viewed entire galactic civilizations as fleeting patterns of limited interest. If we fail, then everything dies anyway. But if we succeed, we might be able to save not just the galaxy, but the essential nature of the species within it. The Harbinger vessel began withdrawing slightly, its reality fields fluctuating as the beings aboard debated among themselves at speeds that spanned multiple temporal dimensions. We will convene our council asterisk, the alien mind finally communicated. If humanity can demonstrate the feasibility of voluntary multidimensional evolution on a galactic scale, we will consider cooperation over conquest. How long do we have to prove ourselves? 1 cycle. If you cannot show significant progress in that time, we will resume our original plan. Asterisk, as the mental link dissolved, Lisa found herself back in normal consciousness on the bridge of the quantum dawn. But she was changed again, her awareness now spanning even more dimensional layers than before. Around her, her crew was similarly transformed, their consciousness permanently expanded by the contact with Harbinger technology. Set course for Earth immediately, she ordered, and give me a direct line to President Vasquez. We need to completely revise our strategy. What did they tell you? Rodriguez asked. That the situation is worse than we imagined, but also that we might have found a way to save everyone. Lisa looked at the display showing the transformed Kepler system, where reality itself had been rewritten according to alien principles. We have 1 year to prove that the galaxy can evolve without losing its soul. As the quantum dawn departed the Kepler system, its crew forever changed by their encounter with the Harbingers, they carried with them knowledge that would reshape humanity's understanding of the crisis they faced. The war was not really about conquest or defense. It was about evolution and the speed at which it could be achieved. And somewhere in the deep dimensions beyond normal perception, ancient entities were watching and waiting to see if this young galaxy's consciousness could mature quickly enough to deserve continued existence. The fate of trillions of beings now rested on humanity's ability to find a middle path between forced transformation and voluntary annihilation. It was an impossible task, but then again, humanity had already achieved the impossible simply by surviving their first encounter with the Harbingers. The emergency session of the Galactic Council that convened 3 days after Captain Park's return was unlike any in the organization's 3,000-year history. Representatives from every major civilization sat in stunned silence as Ambassador Sarah Chun presented the intelligence gathered from the Kepler system encounter. To summarize, Chun said, her voice carrying new harmonic frequencies that indicated she too had undergone dimensional enhancement. The Harbingers are not our primary threat. They are attempting to save the galaxy from something far worse, albeit through methods we consider unacceptable. Prime Chancellor Zephyros, his ethereal form flickering with patterns of deep concern, responded first. You are asking us to believe that entities exist in higher dimensional layers who view our entire galactic civilization as insufficient and are prepared to dissolve all reality if we do not evolve quickly enough. I'm telling you what Captain Park learned through direct mental contact with Harbinger leadership. Whether you choose to believe, it is up to you. General Vorthak slammed his clawed fist on his desk. This is absurd. You expect us to cooperate with the very beings who have destroyed dozens of